We do have a quorum at this
We
point.
do have a
so.
quorum. Okay.
We
So on my kitchen clock, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn the stove down. As I call this meeting to order at 6:02 on January 4th. This is the Brattleboro Planning Commission. So I believe we start with announcements.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. Sorry for the kind of cruising into the new year really fast, and we'll walk through materials kind of with you tonight because I know there wasn't a lot of time to review it. The announcement that I have that I wanted to share, but then we'll talk about it a little bit later on in the agenda, is that we did receive the municipal planning grant to do a housing action plan, which will be a housing needs analysis and strategies. So we're pretty excited about that. The select board is excited about that, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on in the agenda. So that's my announcement.
Okay, does anybody else have any announcements? Nope. Okay. Yes. Jessica, your name tag is.
I was just gonna remind everyone that the community safety review report is being presented to the select board tomorrow night. The facilitators that have been managing that process are going to be presenting to the select board. Have outlined some steps that the town government and police department and other departments can take, and I think that it should generally be on a form both what we're and any work that we may do on future planning.
You froze there for a second, Jessica. Could you repeat that just the last sentence?
Oh, I think it's important and might have some impact on what we're doing as far as planning.
Okay. Any other announcement? Yes, Dory.
Just for folks who didn't know that the select board passed 3-2 the security deposit proposal put forward by the tenants union, which puts a limits on last month's, or just makes it first month's and security. You cannot add last month's security to rent. It was a really good discussion. It's really brought housing to the forefront, which I know y'all have been concentrating on since well before that. But it was a really good discussion. And I think it was just really sort of how it came out at the end is that the statistics show that it was for the betterment of the majority of the people of town to pass this ordinance, and was putting the livelihoods of regular renters over the fear of landlords of losing their security deposits or losing rent. So it was just a good proposal, and we had a lot of support. So yeah, so thanks for Sue and for all the work done in terms of the research side. It was really helpful going forward with all that information, and the tenants union is really stoked to continue to work with the town. That town is showing its desire to work with to help support the renting population, which is a majority of the town. So thanks, guys.
Great.
Good work, Dory.
Any other announcements? Okie doke. Public comments. Seeing we have some public here, this is your opportunity to comment. Yes, Gary, I see your hand up.
Well, I just want to say Happy New Year's to everyone. It's great seeing everybody here. Hey, Dory, how you doing? I was there at the meet when that happened. Also, I believe, I'm not too sure, I think tomorrow's the Human Services Review Board about the budget. Is that tomorrow, Sue, also? Is that going to be incorporated with I don't know if it's this week or next week, or Human Services is supposed to meet up also about the recommendations.
Give me a minute and I'll give me a minute and I will let you know that. Hold on a second.
Excellent. And I'm also proud sponsor and honored to serve with Sue on the new agricultural committee that's coming up. I am stoked, psyched, and just swayed totally about this coming up. And I'm so excited being back on it again, that it's resurrected. And glad to see you guys here on the Planning Commission too. First time ever being here. I used to be on it a long time ago, but I'm glad a lot of things happened. And Dory, I've been trying to get in contact with Tub as well. I'm on their mailing list and I haven't gotten anything. So I don't know what the
Okay.
status is.
All right,
with that.
I'll mention that to the folks doing email.
Yeah, awesome. And basically that's just going to be a busy month. I know coming up now to our RTM, and I'm also happy about all the things that's happened with the Planning Commission and new housing and everything. And like I said, I'm really proud of you guys, and I'm really thankful for you guys for doing such a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. That's nice. Anybody else?
Felicity, can I just want to confirm, Gary is correct. The human services budget will be discussed tomorrow night at the select board meeting as well.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the chats. People are, yeah, okay, finishing dinner. Okay, everybody's finishing dinner. That's why the cameras are off. By the way, we are recording, right? Everybody knows that. Yes, Rich.
Greetings, everyone. It's good to be here with you. A couple people gave me a heads up that you were meeting tonight and that one of the items on your agenda, I don't know if this is a recent addition or not, but was to talk about the preferred solar siting process on a municipal level. And this may or may not have been brought to a head by the recent consideration of the what I'll, for lack of a better name, I'll call the Exit 1 integrated solar site. And you know, of course, you folks have dealt with that recently, and then the select board dealt with it, and Wyndham Regional is dealing with it tomorrow. The three hoops of local approval. Wyndham Regional is also looking at two other projects on the same agenda up in Putney, which are to some degree cognates in that they involve clearing of forest, and they're going through the preferred solar site process. So I don't know if I should bring up everything that I was going to mention just now in this session, or if there's a better time when you're in the agenda. Somebody else can make that call.
It's really up to you, Rich. We're really glad you're here. Because I read your letters. I think they've been put in the file. So I think a number of us, I hope a number of commissioners have read the letters. And we did command ourselves after last month's meeting to have this conversation about developing some criteria so that we didn't get ourselves in a similar situation to the one we were in last month. So you're welcome to speak now or be recognized during our working session, which will come right after we approve the minutes. So really it's the next item after this. And
Okay,
then,
so I might as well wait until we're on topic. So
okay.
yeah, let's cruise along.
Okay, great. So are there any other announcements? All right, then the next item is approval of the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to have a look at those? Yes. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve last meeting's minutes of December 7th.
Great, Kathy seconds it. Is there discussion? I have one issue, which is to request that when people are named, that their roles are identified so that historically people will be able to identify the voice that's being that is speaking. So member of the Energy Committee and Sustainability Coordinator. Historically, that to me is a valuable thing to know who those voices are. But anyway, that's the only thing I would say. Anything else? Okie doke. All those in favor of approving the minutes as circulated, please gesture with your thumbs. Those of you I can see. Jessica. Okay. Dory, I can't see you. Oh, all right. Well, there's enough of us approving. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? No. All right, the minutes are approved. All right, so the next is energy planning, discussion of the process to set criteria for preferred sites. And Sue, since you populated the Google Drive, do you want to just talk about the things that you put in there? Kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So at the last meeting, there was discussion about the fact that the Planning Commission did not want to find themselves in this position again, where you were asked to approve something where we had no criteria. So this is really just a follow-up conversation from that. How do we want to move forward? Who do we want to involve? I did put, let me just confirm what I put in there. Rich had sent 3 files along yesterday, which I put into the Google Drive, which I will let Rich speak to if he's okay with that. And then this afternoon, kind of late before the meeting started, Ralph Mima from the Energy Committee and Stephen Dotson sent along some research that Ralph has been doing with examples of checklists or enhanced energy plans that other communities around the state are using to help define what a preferred solar site should be, whether it's actually designating sites or putting together criteria. So that's what's in the file. But for the purposes of, go ahead, Felicity.
I was just going to say that when the 3 of us, Andrew, Sue, and I were talking about preparing the agenda, we didn't imagine that this was going to be a concluding discussion. This was really just the kickoff conversation because, at least from my perspective, we need a lot more data before we can actually set up a criteria list of some sort. And I think we also want to talk to our colleagues on other committees like the Energy Committee. So this is really just a sort of free-for-all, asking questions, trying to figure out what more information we need, as well as hearing from members from the public to help us in that process. So that just to let you know that we're not expecting a decision to be made tonight or a bullet pointed list to be created.
Felicity, I just wanted to point out, because I'm not sure who you see on the screen, but Stephen Dotson, the Sustainability Coordinator, has joined us. He also staffs the Energy Committee, and the Energy Committee, at least some members have expressed interest in working on this. And I think there is also interest from the Conservation Commission as well.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I can just throw out an idea. We could put together a working group that could work on this and bring it back to the different commissions and committees. But I also, if I could suggest maybe allowing Rich to speak to his what he had sent us as well, because he speaks to in one of them about the town having a process and moving forward to identify or be more prepared in the future.
I see, Stephen, you've got your hand up. Gary, you still have your hand up, but I don't know if that means you still just have your hand up from before, or now you took it down. So, Rich, is it okay if I just ask Stephen why he's got his hand up before you speak? Okay, Stephen.
Thank you. I just briefly wanted to pass on a message from Oscar Heller, the chair of the Energy Committee, that they are looking forward to working with you all to try and develop a set of criteria. Ideally, their preference is to have a criteria list rather than to pick out specific parcels. And he asked me to convey that. But just confirming what Sue said, that a working group sounds good to them. They have eagerness to engage in that, and that should help make clear how these decisions are made moving forward.
Great. Okay. Rich, we're all yours.
Thank you again. I applaud everything I just heard. It's all awesome. My my main point, which you've probably gleaned from the documents that I shared with you, is basically that if there are bodies of oversight and there is a process in place that we go about it as best as we can, knowing that there are degrees of possibility and preferability, and there's trade-offs, and we live in this world where we have to make decisions. So in order to make a good one, we should evaluate to the degree possible. And it sounds like you folks are definitely moving in that direction. So that's basically what I was bringing up, that it be considered. Maybe it was in the tubes before this, but it only came across my radar with this recent project. And there will be more to come. So it's good to look at this now in the early stages. I mean, just witness the fact that Wyndham Regional is looking at 3 such projects tomorrow night. 1 here in Bratt, 2 in Putney. And to the degree that federal policy trickles down, and the great white father, or I don't know, I grew up near Rochester, so it's the great yellow father, Kodak. To the degree that federal policy trickles down, we are going to see a huge uptick in alternate energy projects. That is very, very clear. Under the Biden administration, that is going to be the case, to the degree that it can be instigated and countered against the previous processes. So I'm a little concerned, because it's really, really easy to say yes to solar, where we should be saying yes to good solar. And I fully support energy fuel switching, 100%. It's something we need to do. The fuel source is the symptom. The problem is the energy consumption. We need to keep that in mind. But we are nowhere near ready to deal with choking off our energy habit, which is what's going to happen at some point, but we're not there yet. So in the meantime, we have to make decisions, try to make good ones. And so I am simply asking that we go from the process of having a site that qualifies to actually picking the preferable ones. And my question was the exit one actually a preferred site? Certainly it's a possible site and a potential site and a legally conforming site, but was it preferred? Is it preferred? This particular project is out of the gate and moving fast and is going to happen on the local level. It still has to go through PUC. My experience, PUC on the state level will probably approve this just fine. They're not going to quibble over this unless there's something there that nobody ever dreamed of, but probably not, in terms of archaeology or biology, whatever. So all I can say is thank you folks for putting this on your agenda. I'm glad you're going to look at this. I'm glad you're pulling in Conservation Commission and the Energy Commission. I spoke with Oscar at some length earlier today, and we had a good conversation, and I think we're all on the same page that as long as we're doing our due diligence and meeting our responsibilities, it's the best we can do at the moment, and things will continue to change. So I'm concerned that when and if this checklist, this set of guidelines is put together, that it be as comprehensive and holistic as possible, because to simply do a carbon calculation for, in this case, a forest, the loss of a forest and the replacement of a fossil-based fuel source for a different one, such as solar, That is a very, very incomplete calculation. Just carbon math. That is the obvious dollars and cents calculation that does not take into account so many other things. I don't need to get into that right now, but I'm happy to see that you're opening this conversation, that it will be ongoing, and that you're being proactive. So I want to say thank you. And got your work cut out for you. I've been on a planning commission before, but it was in Halifax and nothing ever happened there. So, you know, I got off easy. Of course, I'm making light of that, but I've been in all of those seats, and it's important work. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I probably don't need to say too much more because I already wrote it down.
Prudence, is that your hand up or no? Rich, I do have one question from reading your documents. The one thing that I think certainly was part of the conversation, I'm not going to say that it was the reason we made the decision or voted the way we did, but it was the fact that this site was zoned as industrial. And so that land could be completely clear cut at any time without any, and I recognize that the notion of giving preference is an important issue here, that we could have let the integrated solar could buy that land and put up the solar panels without ever coming to us, because that's an industrial use, but we gave them an added incentive. In other words, they get, I gather, tax credits, an additional tax credits for being a preferred site. So is that, does it matter in your thinking that because I think it does matter. I mean, and to me, it matters as we make a plan, what the land that we're working with is zoned as when we start the conversation.
Certainly. As the planning commission, who have been directly involved in creating these designated areas and having this oversight, yes, of course that matters. And I recognize the problem inherent in the fact that a private property owner can clear cut forest and nobody can say boo about it within certain restrictions. That's problematic too. And that's just reflective of society's values in the first place, and the economic drivers and the incomplete math that's involved in all of these equations. So you can't, this is the process of arriving at the best decision possible under the circumstances that you're faced with and we're all faced with. So yes, it's zone industrial. Probably no industrial development could ever happen on that site given the slopes. It just wouldn't. It's sort of, if it's going to be industrial, it's going to be an energy farm. That's kind of where that lands. So I'm not saying that the decision was wrong. I hope I'm making myself clear. I'm not saying it was a bad decision, a poor decision, a wrong decision based on the facts. It's the fact that nobody does look at whether it's preferred or not in terms of land use. In a perfect world, we're not cutting forests down. I think that if someone did an exhaustive, comprehensive carbon analysis, that it does not play out that well. It just doesn't. So I know Oscar did a quick calculation, and it demonstrates that there's great benefit there as opposed to other fuels. As opposed to the benefit of the forest, that calculation is not done. We're just looking at fuel switching. So I don't know how a small town board wraps their head around that, but it's not me. I don't have that expertise. but I've seen enough to know that it's not simple. So thank you for tackling this. And you can put your gun sights on Oscar or somebody else. So
I see Stephen's got his hand up. So Stephen?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, there are no actual incentives or monetary benefits. It is literally the scale of the project that is permitted. So 500 kilowatt as opposed to 150. If they could have a viable project at 150, they wouldn't even have to come and ask for permission, nor would any other industrial use of that parcel, right? And so I think there's two very important questions that we're wrestling with here, and they're both worth taking time and consideration for. And one is specific to the solar site designation, and when do we give that? How do we give that? Let's have a principled way of doing that, right? And that's what I think the Energy Committee, we're all united in how we want to approach that. There's a subsequent piece here that I think is specific to, is industrial zoning threatening certain valued forest blocks? Because whether it's solar or something else, that would be the case if it's zoned thusly. And it's only because of solar having a little bit more kind of, it's inspected a little more for this process. It's actually more rigorous and in its inspection as a solar site than it would be for an industrial site, that we've even tripped over this question. But I think it's an important one, right? So I want to recognize that Rich is affirming two very important questions. One is, are we zoning the right industrial parcels in relationship to our forests? And do we have a principled way of designating solar sites moving forward? So that's how I see it overall, my 2 cents.
Andrew.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to point out, I made mention of this at our last meeting in December, that the site, the parcel does have a habitat, a forest block mapped by ANR. It's on the lower scale of, again, it's from 0 to 10 in terms of its significance at a statewide perspective. So a 4 would not be at the level that would go to the next level of mapping, which would be what you would see maybe more in the Green Mountain National Forest or the Green Mountains, just because there's no continuous block to, because, you know, we have 91 there, and then there's some neighborhoods as well as the Delta campus on the other side. But I think it also is important to understand that it could be of importance at the local level. And again, it's, you know, any forest is important at any age, as Rich has pointed out in his comments. So something, you know, I know the Conservation Commission was really interested at our last meeting, was looking more into those forest and habitat connectors / blocks, maybe looking in more in depth. But just wanted to point that out there, that there is a significance, even though it might not be at the state level.
So I have a sort of semi list of things that of information that I feel like I would certainly need in order to figure out how to create a criteria of sorts for this preferred designation. But I'm curious if other folks do, or how you're thinking about how we're going to move forward. Whether or not you think the working group is a good idea, or anything. Commissioners. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I'd just like to maybe help form the boundaries of what we're doing a little bit by giving an option that maybe we're not considering. And I'm not necessarily espousing this, but we don't need to add any criteria or parcels for preferred sites that are different or beyond the ones that the PUC rule defines. Like, we don't need to find exceptions to the disturbed sites and say we give approval for this. We can say we only allow solar on approved sites. So we should, you know, keep that in mind as well.
Stephen.
Sorry, I just have to chime in that part of what we're wrestling with is that there are actual pathways to this designation that are regulated. And so I think anyone is enabled to bring forward a request. You can't, there's a pathway established by regulation, I think, for that. And I could come up with the actual rule. Sue, I think it was in the email that Ralph cited, actually. And please correct me if I'm off course, because I know I'm still new to the government game entirely, but that can't be dismantled necessarily. I guess you all could say you won't consider any requests that come before you, but it is part of what's kind of written in as one of many pathways to being a preferred solar site designation. All the other pathways never come before you. All the brownfields, all the gravel pits, all those kinds of sites, they already can build at 500 kilowatts without having to get permission in this way. So we're really defining the one remaining path that exists for things that don't already fall in all those buckets. So I don't know if you're even able to close that door entirely from a regulatory standpoint.
Sue, do you want to chime in and confirm or deny?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could close it, but you need to go through the process, and we need to, you know, understand that, you know, or the public needs to understand that that would be our position. You know, we're not going to designate anything preferred, because we want them on the brownfields and the landfill and the rooftops and that kind of thing. I think that that could be the conclusion of the process that you go through. In which case, but I think it's still, we need a process to get there.
Okay.
And if I can make one last point, right? If you're a developer, you don't want to come before the planning commission and then before the select board and then before the WRC in order to make a project happen. And so there's already incentive and interest in finding those other sites and utilizing those. And I would refer us to the counsel of Ralph Maima, honestly, who is himself a solar developer in this way. And he can talk to you about how, of course, they would be going for those sites if and when they can find them, always. And that may be some of the three that are coming up before the WRC. I'm not sure, not familiar with the Putney projects at this point. I should be, but there's already cost savings. It's easier to do those projects. It's cheaper to do them. It doesn't take as much time to go before all these bodies and get permission and take the risk of the project being shut down. So this is really kind of the one other pathway, the alternative pathway that costs more money, that is more arduous for solar developers. So just understand, it's not as though you're disincentivizing all those other uses, right? Those are already easier to pursue from a business standpoint and many other standpoints. The reviews of those, it's easier to clear. So, yeah.
Can I just stop you there, so, Stephen, and Prudence, I know you're next. But I am now thoroughly confused by what you've just said, because I recall in our last meeting in December, out of Ralph's mouth, if I'm not mistaken, was it's way too expensive to do those preferred sites, as in parking lots and on top of buildings.
So the rooftop solar is a different thing. When you think about the structural integrity of buildings and the logistics of doing piecemeal construction, the project costs go through the roof.
But in
We're talking about
parking
brownfields.
lots and brownfields, he said those are way too expensive. If you do it in town, it's way too expensive, is what he said. If in fact the preferred sites were actually cheaper, everybody would be putting them on brownfields and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I think we should get Ralph to just clarify then, because I don't want to be misstating him either. But my understanding is that quarries and these already used industrial sites are in fact preferred, have been where a lot of the projects have gone in recent years. When I was on the WRC's energy committee, that's what we were seeing, is a lot of old quarries, a lot of brownfield sites, a lot of that reusable land, but only for very restricted purposes in some cases. And so I think there are different considerations when you're talking about rooftops and buildings versus open spaces that have been previously used intensively in certain ways. And we're kind of mixing up rooftops and other very different applications of solar that cost different things. But Ralph is the one that I would point us to really illuminate if we're looking to understand the deep dive of it. But my point is just, it doesn't disincentivize all those things. They still enjoy all the benefits that are conferred by the solar site designation that these other projects are asking for. They're just going through so much more work to get that ability to work at 500 kilowatts. It's just not usually possible to find 500 kilowatts across rooftops in a concentrated way that makes a business case. It does make sense if it's an old quarry and it's very open and there aren't many possible reuses. So it's just very different. I'm sorry to make it so confusing.
Prudence.
I think that a working group would be really helpful. This is complicated, and so I think it's it's going to be a deep dive. And so we're talking about a working group with planning commission reps and also energy committee and conservation committee. Would that be the group?
Yeah, I mean, we would constitute it. So whatever you think.
That sounds good. It's not my idea, but that's what there's interest on those committees. They certainly have knowledge.
Rich.
I want to acknowledge that this is a very challenging and complex process. It's a big thing to ask you folks to consider with the degree of authority and oversight that you have as a municipal body. It's frustrating that although the comprehensive energy plan makes it very clear that there is a priority ranking of preferred sites, including all of the ones that were just mentioned. And at the bottom of that list, the ones to be avoided at all costs in a philosophical manner are prime ag lands and forests. It's stated very clearly. There is an exemption carved out and a pathway, as Stephen pointed out, for that to happen. However, and at times there's an economic incentive to do so. So there is a total disconnect with the priority list going in one direction and economic incentive going in the other direction. And how do we tackle that? I don't know. And that's what you're going to be tackling. And with respect to the projects in Putney, which were just mentioned, one is a project of Ralph's, and it is prime ag land and forest land. It's at the intersection of River Road and High-Low Biddy, right next to the Green Mountain Power substation. And it is the taking of several acres of forest and prime ag land. And the other one is adjacent to the Putney Paper landfill site between the interstate and the Connecticut River. It is prime ag land on the riverbank. These are places that should not be developed, but they are because of this disconnect. And I don't know how to tackle that. It's the economics that's the problem. So that's just a comment. I acknowledge that this is a really thorny issue, and we have a team of horses going in opposite directions.
I have Dory, and then I have Jessica, and then I have Gary.
I really appreciated reading your letters, Richard. I think you were actually very on point with a lot of what we actually discussed when approving this last one. Tom did really good due diligence in the last meeting, bringing this up and making it really kind of, that was forefront of what we were thinking of, like, why are we developing this space, this wooded space? Why is that the right thing to be doing here? And I think it does make sense moving forward, either a working group or just due diligence to what we can do to make sure that we are not developing lands that, once again, shouldn't be developed, that keep our town green and help support environmental sustainability. So I appreciate your letters, and I want to let you know that that actually was the main point of a lot of discussion in our last meeting. So you're not alone in that thought process.
Jessica.
Hi. So I did miss the last meeting, and so I'm sorry for that, or I'm sorry for bringing up something if we've already discussed it or thrown it out there. I was just taking a peek at the town plan and the sections on land use and natural resources, and it does mention a few categories that we might be able to use in the future around how to value forested land. So just for that committee, the information is actually in the plan under future land use, in the land use chapter and in resource lands in the natural resources chapter.
Thank you. Oh, Jessica. Gary.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there a mechanism in place to help pretty much navigate and intertwine that's going to intersect at the same time situations like this, that when you're acquiescing other lands that could help you have a better insight to, so that way in a situation like this does arise, you'll be able to situate it in a better way that is going to be beneficial and equitable on both ends?
Sue?
I need to think. I'm not sure I quite understand what you're asking. Are you thinking of other case studies, Gary, that like we can?
Yes, yes,
on?
exactly, Sue. Exactly. I meant that in a broader sense, but I should have narrowed that down. But yeah, definitely in that sense that you'll have a better idea. So in that situation like this, you'll know how to present it, you know, in a situation like this. So that way you'll know how to chart it in a way that both ends will be equitably fair.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit to past solar projects in Brattleboro. You know, definitely the landfill that has, you know, one of the largest in the states, if not the largest. And that, you know, that was definitely an industrial site, but it's also a preferred site because it's a landfill. But I've got some knowledge about the ones that are visible as you travel north, just south of exit 3. One of those was on state farm, state ranked ag lands, and we took that to the agricultural advisory committee, and the farmers were all for it. They said, you know, it's just, it hasn't been farmed in a long time. You can put them in, take them out, and farm it again. So, you know, I mean, I've got some knowledge of other sites in Brattleboro, but not across the region or across the state. But I think that's something that could definitely be looked at if there's a working group or whoever, if it's the planning commission and working on it, that we could pull together.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. Thank you all. Oh, by the way, Gary Stroud, District 2, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Gary. So it's interesting that in our land use goals, it actually doesn't say anything about energy. Sorry, I snorted. I rarely do that when I laugh, but every once in a while. So I'm just curious about that, because it strikes me that if energy generation is not in our land use plan, but we're designated, I mean, this comes under that criteria. I mean, if it's not even in our land use plan that we actually use our land to generate energy, then maybe we should probably change the plan. If indeed but that's undoubtedly a non-planner simplistic view of the plan. So I'll retract it, but it does seem like it should be in there in some way.
It's got its own chapter though.
It has
in
its
the
own.
town plan.
Okay. But maybe, I mean, there could be a more system. I mean, I think this is maybe to a certain extent what Gary is talking, or what I understood Gary to be talking about, is this sort of more systems approach to our planning, the way in which we see things intersecting with each other, rather than in being in separate chapters. It's more of a web. And that leads me back to what Rich said about the economy. And this notion that I'm a little fearful, and maybe just because I'm a little fearful these days, because who isn't a little fearful? The idea of a working group spending an inordinate amount of time going through all sorts of material and then essentially coming up with, if it's cheap, we're going to do it cheap. Or shall I say, if the short term is cheap, we're going to do it cheap, because undoubtedly the short term cheap is the long term super expensive. When you're cutting down forests, right? You generate a little bit of fuel and then you can't breathe. Sorry, again, simplistic, but you understand the point. So I'm just wondering, I mean, I keep thinking, even in our conversation last, I wanted to say last semester, sorry, again, in our last meeting, that if we shouldn't be talking to our lawmakers, because if the rules and regulations that, like in one comment that Rich made in one of the documents that you wrote, was, we have these energy goals that say you have to do this, but there are no incentives to make that actually happen. So it's sort of forcing our hand. And indeed, this came up in our last meeting, where we have to meet these energy goals. How are we going to meet them? We're going to have to cut down trees. But why should we be cutting down trees to meet energy goals when we do have large parking lots? And admittedly, I mean, and this was what I remember when Ralph said, but it's really expensive to put solar over parking lots. Well, it shouldn't be. It should be cheaper to put solar over parking lots than it is to cut down trees. And that's not our decision, right? That's the lawmakers. The lawmakers, the people who make the incentives that make it possible for people to develop this and not develop that. Those are incentivizing programs that are put in. If I'm understanding it correctly, they're done by lawmakers that make the economy run. So I guess I don't want to sort of throw syrup in the works here, but I am concerned about the idea of creating a set of criteria that leaves us back in the same problem of trying to meet goals with our hands tied about meeting them and preserving the planet at the same time, even though the goals themselves are designed for us to be preserving the planet. Comments? Yeah, Dory.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they don't necessarily have to work opposite each other. I think they could work hand in hand. Obviously, I think statewide, we need to, that's definitely obviously like a greater thing. But in terms of the town being able to assess what is here and be able to at least have a nice short list of space that we like, A, of some criteria, but B, of space that we know that if, say, someone was looking for solar and they'd be like, well, what do you suggest? We have a nice short list. But also, I mean, I think with criteria, it doesn't mean that it needs to like check every box to be able to go through. Maybe it's just like the majority. Maybe it's just a discussion base. But having some side guidelines is not a bad thing. It just means that if tons and tons of solar is coming up, and that's the hope, it just means that it's going through a slightly more rigor than just dropping to our plate and being like, okay, well, does this feel right? We can still be like, oh, okay, well, so we've done some research on that town and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's necessarily an either or. I think you could do some good work with a small committee over a shorter period of time.
Other comments? Yeah, Gary.
Well, I guess I'm saying I don't think you need a focus group because everything's pretty much laid out. It's just a matter of brainstorming it together, what you have with the state level, local, and then just putting that together. And that should be able to pretty much govern to which direction you'll go with it. That's just my opinion. I mean, I don't know how the rest of the committee feels about that, but that's just a thought on my behalf because it's pretty much already laid out. And there's going to be probably changes down the road, but just thinking that if you're taking more time to try to dissect it, it's going to take more time to do because it becomes more tedious. But I just think what's already in front of you, taking that first step will give you an idea of which directions now to go from there.
So I'm looking at the time, and we're 15 minutes away from moving into our second hour. So do you guys want to just form the working group and move ahead with that?
When you say you guys, are you meaning the planning commission? Or
Yeah, meaning the planning commission. Yes, Kathy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to make a working group with members from those three commissions. I do think unpacking the economics is important, and so it might be good to try to add some expertise about the costs. I don't know. I follow what you're saying, Felicity, but I'm wondering if there's other cost considerations that we're just not aware of, and it would be good to understand those. And use that as the frame to figure out how to incentivize the solar showing up where we actually want it to show up, and clarifying too, I think if there are obstacles or if there are backward incentives, like understanding what they are so that we could try to get those changed. That becomes a whole other, that's the Energy Committee's job. But yeah, I think at least moving forward would start to make the path. So go from there.
Okay. So do I have, wow, I've got an echo. Are there volunteers from the Planning Commission who would like to participate on this? Oh man, Dory, yes. Jessica,
I
yes.
mean, yeah, I definitely am interested. I would love to work with other people on this process. But yeah, I think I'm definitely curious enough. I don't have the experience, so I'd love to have some people from the energy or the environmental commissions on this, because I will do some research and then you'll be like, why is this one guy have yeah. So I'd love people far more experience than I, but yeah, I'd be willing to be on that.
Great. Jessica, you want to do it too? Are you frozen? She's frozen. Okay.
I'm unstable, guys. I'm sorry.
But you did raise your hand.
Yeah, it
Okay.
if needed, I have time to step up for that right now, and I am interested in it.
Tom, what about you?
Yeah, I would be interested as well, because I want to see how my, if you all haven't noticed, I've been kind of bringing up contrary comments throughout all of this. And so I'd love to see how I can be constructive, if at all, and come to a good option and compromise or set of criteria or sites with other folks. So
Oh,
it'll
Tom,
be interesting to find out.
Tom, I think you're incredibly constructive. I think of you as our environmental conscience, at least in this conversation.
Sorry, Kathy. Oh, okay.
In this conversation. Otherwise, it's generally Kathy. Okay. Anybody else, or is that good?
To cut it off, we can't have anybody else, or we're going to have to warn it as a planning commission meeting. So
right.
if anybody else wants to, that we can make that happen. But if you're good at leaving it at 3 and bringing it back to the planning commission, I think that would be preferable.
Is it possible to ask for an alternate to step in when any of the three cannot go to the meeting so that the process can go forward with the full cohort of commissioners?
Sure.
Great. Somebody want to volunteer as an alternate? Kathy? No. Darn. Well, ain't gonna be me.
Felicity, I can say too that I know there's eagerness on the Energy and Conservation Commissions to chip in. So I think if you all have three and we have three from the other two groups, that's a group of 6 that's hammering this out. And that's enough cats to wrangle in my mind, frankly.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking of an alternate as a person who would, if somebody can't make the meeting, the alternate would show up. But I concur, says Gary. Great. Okay, super. Do we need a motion for that, Sue? To come into being a working group?
I don't think so,
Great.
but I don't know. So if you want to give a motion, but I don't.
Well,
I'm
I
not-
don't necessarily want to do a motion, but I would suggest that we put a time frame on it. I love time frames. That way we, you working
Go
group
for
are charged to come up with a draft list of criteria for our decision-making process should we get another request for a preferred solar site by August of 2021? September?
That sounds.
November?
I think we should work with August, if
August.
not sooner.
Are you guys good with that? Great. Okay. August. Jessica, August. You have to do it by August 2021.
I think that works with the Energy Committee.
Okay, super. Okay, great. Is anybody? Yes, Rich.
If you're done talking about this, I'm going to bow out and get out of your hair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Myself as well. Thank you all.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you for attending.
Okay. Sue just took a 2-minute break. I think that since the next item on the agenda is going to be led by her, I think that means we're all going to take a 2-minute break. So 2-minute break. See you in 2.
Finish dinner.
Yeah, finish dinner. We are called back into meeting, right?
Sorry about that. I didn't realize you all stepped away. Just need a little.
Well, we couldn't do it without you, Sue. So
I'm sorry, drinking water during the meeting was not a good idea.
Right, I get it. Okay, so our next item on the agenda is land use regulations amendments work session. So
Yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen. We're picking up with last month's conversation about some of the housing related changes that Tom had suggested, and just bringing them back to discuss. And I am just trying to, give me a minute here, sorry. I get so confused whichever virtual meeting platform I'm on and totally forgot how to screen share. I think my week between Christmas and New Year's, just my brain went to mush. Okay, so the first one I wanted to talk about was the attached housing. And this was the one where Tom brought up some concerns about we couldn't have certain types of housing, with the idea that the garage had to be set back 16 feet behind the building front line. So we couldn't do, some of the images he showed were basically, they reminded me of England, and kind of a garage with the unit on top of row houses, really nice looking housing. And so I made an attempt to kind of clean up this section to address the garage issue. I had brought up that the reason we didn't want, that really what we were trying to prevent was snout housing, which is where the driveway, the garage dominates kind of the space in between the house and the road. So you get these blank walls, and it's really a very auto-dominated landscape. So if you look at, I'll walk you through the other changes that I'm proposing to this just for clarity's sake. But if you look down to 3B, building design, what I'm suggesting is that basically we require that garages either be detached, facing the front, facing the side or rear lot line, or not be closer to the front line than the front facade elevation. And so that would allow it to be kind of in the images that Tom had shared last month, which I'm sorry I don't have in front of me to kind of show you if you weren't on it. But that would address the, so you can either have a detached, the garage can face the side or the rear lot lines, or not be any closer than the front facade.
So
So-
the garage and the facade of the house are like this, facing the road.
Yes, or they could be stacked on top of each other. So you could have the garage underneath and the
Right.
house up above,
But
or the
you
unit
can't,
up above.
but you can't have just garage. You can have garage and house,
Correct.
garage and house.
Yes.
Okay, I get it.
And then other changes that I made in here, I thought it was a little confusing when I read through. So sometimes with detached housing, because sometimes it's owner occupied, you want to be able to kind of condoize the individual units. And so I think with the idea with the section 3, actually there's 2 sections 3s now, I'm gonna have to make that change. But what had been under lot design is really talking about subdivision. So if you've got all these attached units and you want to make them individual for the purposes of sale, you're going to need to be able to subdivide it, but it's not a typical subdivision. So we're allowing smaller lot sizes and smaller lot frontage. So when I was looking at what this was based on for language, they called it subdivision rather than lot design, and it seemed to make more sense to me. And then we also, under number 2, the zoning dimensional standards, it just makes it clear that the minimum lot size regulation only applies to the parcel that these attached units are being built on. It doesn't apply to each individual unit. So it could have been interpreted, I think, in any number of ways there. Also, we're not going to apply the side yard setback, where there's common walls. That's kind of a no-brainer, but it just makes it clearer that it only would apply at the end wall.
Okay.
So these are the changes that I proposed for this attached housing, mainly to address Tom's concern about the garage. And I don't know if you find that satisfactory, Tom, or.
Yeah, I do.
thought-
And I think good catches for clarity with the others. With the garage point, one thing I noticed in the interim from last meeting to this one was, I'm pretty sure if I interpreted correctly, with non-attached housing, so let's just say single family and multi-unit dwellings, there's no restriction on the garage like this unit, like this section of the rules currently has. So it's kind of odd to me that attached housing had it, and for no seeming good reason. So I think this brings it to parity or equality with all other housing for the most part. Yeah, and I think, and good catch on the detached thing. I started running through images of my mind and of if a detached garage that is much in front of the building front line would look odd, and or like unaesthetic or something, or car dominated. And I suppose it could in some situations if it's like a large carriage house and it's like right at the minimum setback and the house is way far back, but I don't know. It's not scaring me off. So I'd like to hear why you thought to add that in, the detached part.
Yeah, I think when I added detached, I was thinking it would be behind the, I thought it would be behind the building front line. It could be in the rear, in the backyard. It could. So I think that there is probably a clarity thing there that I should add. If you all
Yeah.
feel that it should not be in front of the building front line, then I think that needs to be fixed.
Well, however,
It
though,
wasn't my intent that it.
oh, okay. But on the other hand, I mean, I do think that if a house, let's just say in a more rural area, a house is farther back and they want to have like their garage as close, at the minimum setback or close to it to the road because of, I don't know, snow challenges or I don't know, any of various reasons why they would want storage, vehicle storage closer to the road. I don't see the reason to bar that in all cases, but I guess I'm just starting to run through the scenarios in my mind and it's not fully formed, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of situations in rural areas where there's a barn that's been converted to a garage. And so often, yeah, it's in front of a building.
Right. Yeah, and so I don't know if that should just be grandfathered in or if if we should keep allowing that to happen with new buildings or new conversions. So I mean, I'd be okay with that. I mean, I certainly don't like the idea of things looking auto-dominated, but I don't like the idea of restricting, practical usefulness of people's property either. So,
What's the area, what is the zoned area where this applies? Does this apply across all zones or does this apply only to which zoned area
yeah, it's townwide, I think.
is townwide?
Yes.
That seems weird. Because
Well-
Sue, I'm totally with you on the notion of you don't want to walk down a street and just see garage, 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 because that's hideous. And it's I don't unhealthy. But I'm really thinking about I'm thinking about urban cities that I've been in where you're constrained on either side by just garage doors and it's very unattractive and very unhealthy. Mainly because there aren't trees on those kinds of streets seemingly. So it's just it's sort of unsafe, unsightly and unhealthy. But it is true that if you don't want to have somebody plow an enormous driveway, and so you just put your garage the necessary setback in so that you don't have to plow a huge driveway, and then you just dig your path to your house. We wouldn't want to restrict that, would we?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, the one thing that's kind of going for it in the more urban parts of town, there's a minimum and a maximum setback. So you may not have a lot of room for a detached garage. I'm trying to think, like in the residential neighborhood, the maximum front setback is 40 feet. I mean, I guess, yeah, you could fit a garage in that area. You could, and we do have some relaxed setbacks. No, we only have sorry, as I'm talking through this, I think that it's unlikely if you put a house 40 feet back, you still have you're basically only having, let's see, you have 15 feet that's a required front setback, so the garage could not be there. So you're left with 25 feet. So you could potentially put a garage in between the front of the house and the front setback. but the residential areas that I'm thinking of, I mean, it'd be pretty tight because some of the lots are not very wide. I don't know what I guess where I'm trying to go is I'm not sure how at risk if we left it as we would allow a detached structure.
Right, I get it.
Would be.
It does seem like it would be really helpful as we're going through this process to have more pictures. And I know there are, I know that there are pictures in the Google Drive, because when I looked through it, there were pictures there. But it seems like it would be so that we're all on the same page as this is what we want and this is what we don't want.
Okay.
Because
We
I
can do
certainly
that.
have a clear image in my head of what I think that we're trying to restrict, but I don't know that image is being shared with the rest of you all.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
We could also draw out, I think that we could probably use SketchUp and draw out the different variations of what this could end up being like. I mean, I do think with attached housing, it's less likely that you would end up with a detached garage in front of it. I'm just trying to even picture what that might look like. So I think I do need to go search for pictures. And
Andrew.
Just to clarify from Dory's comment, Dory, are we talking about like, so you want an example of a detached garage which would be located in the front setback that would fit within that 40 foot front setback, kind of how that would look? Is that what we're trying to clarify in our heads?
No, yeah, it's just more the wording itself. I was like, I read the wording like, I don't know, like 10 times. I was trying to like suck it out. And finally, like, I was like, oh, okay, all right. And I just don't know if there's a slightly different way of wording it. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Garages shall either be detached from residence or face side or rear lot line. Yeah, I don't exactly know. Maybe just that little thing, a little bit more clarity in that words, because it took me a hot second. Maybe I am dyslexic, so it does take me a second there. But it may be worth just rearranging a little bit to find slightly more clear wording.
sure. I appreciate that comment, and reading zoning can always be confusing. So if there's any way that we can, make it more clear for everybody to read zoning, I think that'd be good. I think one thing that might help is if I enumerate these rather than have it as a listing. But I'll also try to find more plain English as well.
Andrew, again.
I think it's definitely possible for us to kind of put something together via SketchUp, because I agree. For me, even as someone as a planner who deals with this kind of language, it is confusing, and I don't want to make this more confusing for a member of the public, because we already get so many of those questions as it is. So maybe part of that would just be putting in an image of, to show an example of how these different scenarios would look. It could be as simple as that, or maybe there's a way we can just simplify this language. But basically, it's no problem to put together illustrations.
Yeah. I mean, I just think in terms of planning for us to actually have a vision of the sort of what we're imagining the town will develop into. Because that's the point of planning, right? Is that when Brattleboro has reached whatever it is that it's headed towards becoming, that it will have an aesthetic component to it that will have been planned, right? That's the point. And so it would be good for us to imagine what that vision is, to be able to say, we want to walk down the street and there we want trees, and we want to be able to see the people living in the houses, and we want to see the houses. And we don't want to feel that we are dominated by machinery or private transportation.
No, I agree. I think urban design could be really powerful. So, yeah.
Can I just make a small point about wording there for the garages?
Yeah, Tom, please.
Can you use the term building front line instead of front facade elevation? Because I think the term building front line is the common term throughout the land use regs. So one thing I do often with the land use regs is when I'm just like, oh my gosh, 250 pages, how am I going to find what I'm looking for, or that I found all aspects of it, is I search keywords, and I just hope that the same term is used for the same idea all throughout. And so at least when we can catch it here, let's do so.
You caught me because actually when I wrote this, I was like, I need to go back and check and see what the right term to use is so that it is consistent, and I didn't do that. So thank you.
Right.
Control F can definitely be your friend.
Yeah, Control F.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just, can you scroll up, Sue, to the section before? I think also just the language of the lot and the subdivision, you know, like that whole A, B, C, and D, well, you took D out, but the A, B, and C. As I'm reading it, I'm thinking, are they talking about the original lot? Are they talking about the subdivided lot? So if you can maybe just, if there's language to clarify that. And each lot must have a minimum lot area of 4,000 square feet, or the district minimum. Seems really huge when you're thinking about, you know, attached housing. Like up the street from us, there's like the two condos, you know, and they share one wall. They slightly catty corner direction of each other. You know, our whole house is like 2,000 square feet. So if you had a series of 3 or 4 row houses, you know, how are you counting that 4,000 square feet? Is the implication that's because that's a huge house. If, you know, the one and the two in the middle each have to be 4,000 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the front of the building. It would be anything that's you know, basically from the street to the rear property. So it's including open space on, you know, would kind of be going all the way back. But sure, 4,000 could be too big. So it sounds like we need to come back with some more images for this. You know, we're not at a point to finalize this particular attached housing. We'll come back with some more images and kind of some dimensions, and maybe take a look at, you know, some of the condo developments in town to get an idea of what are those existing, how are they plotted out, and see how we can't figure that out so that it's a more reasonable number than 4,000.
Dory, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, just on the line, each lot must have a minimum like must meet the district minimum or that of 4,000 square feet. I think if you put the district minimum first, it makes it a little bit clearer that it's not, it could be obviously less than 4,000 depending on the district, but that 4,000 has yeah, or 4,000, but yeah, that may need to change. I'm building a square foot, a tiny house on wheels that's going to be 160 square feet, so 4,000 seems insane, but that's just a normal size house, and I'm building a very small one. So
Just to point out, we don't have a district that has any sort of lot that's less than 4,000 square feet right now. So that could be something else to look at, as we've obviously brought up in the past.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think, Andrew, that's exactly where my confusion comes in the language, because you're talking about a lot that you are building on. But the way I'm reading this is you're talking about the lot of each separate unit. You know, like C is indicating that you have to have separate utility, water, and wastewater lines. So I'm assuming those lines are going to each separate unit in a row house. So is the lot the whole lot, or is the lot each separate subdivision lot? And that's what is confusing about the language for me, because I don't know what lot is referring to.
After subdivision.
It's each subdivision.
Yeah.
It's the subdivided lot, not the initial parcel lot.
Also, just to clarify, I was wrong. The UC district does not have minimum lot sizes, but that's the only district where you can go below 4,000 square feet.
Huh.
But then we also have PUD standards, so there's ways to move within it.
All right, so shall we bring this one back?
Yes.
It's some
That'd be great.
clearer, even more clear language. Okay, so moving on to the next one was the single room occupancy facilities. So Andrew worked on cleaning this one up. Let me move it down, sorry. So we got rid of the common area requiring 200 square feet on each floor. Something looks funny with that. So we got rid of the common area requirement on each floor. We, instead of 50 square feet per unit of usable common outdoor space accessible to all residents, Tom kind of pointed us in the direction of the multifamily, multi-unit requirements, and seemed to make sense to us. So what we're providing here is similar to what's required of multi-unit dwellings, which is a minimum of 400 square feet of common outdoor open space accessible to all residents. And then if they're in the urban center or within a quarter mile of a public park, they do not need to meet this requirement. So again, that's bringing some consistency and fairness in the treatment of housing. We're requiring a minimum of 1 laundry facility. If the facility has more than 12 units, then it needs to have 2 per building. Tom.
I think Dory will help clarify this, since we talked about this point, but I thought what we talked about was that ratio of 1 to 12 was not for laundry facility, but was for washer and dryer. Because a laundry facility room can have 1 washer and dryer in it, or it can have 5 of each. I think the important part is to have, if there's lots of people above that ratio, to have multiple machines, not to have multiple rooms necessarily.
Andrew.
I think a way we can clarify that is just maybe, we might have a definition already, but defining what 1 laundry facility means. Like, does it mean that 1 laundry facility will have 1 washer and dryer? Or so maybe that would clarify that section. And just to clarify too, when I was writing this up, I believe we discussed at last meeting something about one of these facilities, which would include 1 washer and dryer per this many units, and then if you went above that, it'd be another one. I think I was trying to hit on it, but I might not exactly hit on the exact language that was discussed. Dory, I think you were the one who brought that up last time about a certain number. I couldn't remember what exactly that number was.
I'm trying to recall either. I was just like happy with the idea of there being a laundry room in a building, because mine doesn't have one. But I think you did want, I think it was like a minimum of, or it's like, I was thinking about like, if you have 30 people in a building, you maybe want a machine for every 15. Because you just think about the 30 people spaced out throughout the week doing laundry at different times, having two washers, like a washer for 15 people is like the most reasonable you probably want to do. assuming people are doing it on the same regular thing. So if you had more than for every 15 residents.
So if you were to do it that way, then one room would equal, one laundry facility would equal one washer dryer. But
Depending.
I like Andrew's idea of actually defining facility as opposed to listing the number of washers and dryers that you have to say, because that, I mean, it just seems it would be easier in the long run to say that a laundry facility is a facility that includes 2 washers and 2 dryers, or 1 washer and 1 dryer. And that way, every time you say you're required to have 2 facilities or 3 facilities.
You could say at least 1 washer and dryer and an additional washer and dryer by every 15 residents. Does that make sense? That you stipify, that you like say out, like must have a laundry room with a washer and dryer per every so many more residents.
But then is it acceptable that if somebody were to say, I'm going to put in 20 spots for 20 people, and they have only 1 laundry room, but it has 3-4 machines in it, is that acceptable?
It doesn't feel
So
unacceptable.
in that case, we do want to list the numbers of machines, because for me, a facility is a room.
Right.
And if we're requiring them to have facilities, it means we're requiring them to have rooms. But if we're requiring them to have washers and washing machines and drying units, which I would say, as per the energy thingy, that we should not require dryers, but that's just me. Then, you know, we need to say you have to have so many washing machines rather than you have to have so many facilities, because it is true that a room, you know, you want to save the room for a more useful purpose. If it's just, you just need 2 machines, you don't need to have 2 rooms.
Right. My recommendation is that we do it based on number of washer and dryers. I think I'm not in favor of defining what a laundry facility is. I don't think we have that currently. So I would just rather keep it, if it's, you know, 1 washer and dryer, up to you if you want the dryer. SROs, I think you can only have a max, I think it's designed for 1 person, but we define that. Or maybe it allows for up to 2 people. So we could just say, you know, 1 washer and dryer per every 10 units or 12 units.
That sounds good. Who's the unicorn?
Unicorn.
Is that you, Sue? Or is that you
What do
in
you-
on the Google Drive?
Oh, that's just the character that they make for someone who's on that page.
I have never been a unicorn.
I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
The little green person who's on the page. It was,
Yeah. Now I see it. My panel of people were over it. I'm like, what is she talking about?
sorry. Visual person. Okay, are we good to go on this one? We've got more. You got rid of the common kitchen. That's good. That's what we talked about. I can't make it move. Somebody else has to make it move.
Oh, sorry.
We also
Yeah.
got rid of the provision for common open space within the facility. We just deleted that line.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's what we talked about.
Wondering about, you put sort of basic requirements for laundry machines for the number of residents. Is there any sort of consideration for what a full kitchen facility would mean for 8 residents versus 25 residents?
Good question.
Wait, so Jess, were you talking about in terms of like in the private resident kitchens, or because we were just talking about communal kitchens in this aspect?
Yeah, talking about a communal kitchen, like will a mini fridge and a hot plate cut it? Do you need a 6-burner gas industrial walk-in fridge? Like what what is appropriate for or do we want to say it's appropriate for, you know, an 8-person house or a 25-person house? Is there a difference? Do we want to outline that like we outline laundry?
Sue, can you go down a little bit so we can see what I is, because that looks,
Yeah, this is what Jess is talking about, I think.
a common full
area.
kitchen facility. A full kitchen includes a sink, refrigerator, a stove, range top, or oven.
Right. But right now we're saying that you only need one. And Jess's point is, well, if this is a large SRO facility, do you need more than one? Or should there be more than one? Because a common kitchen for 6 people is different than a common kitchen for 25 people.
Right. Gary's got his hand up. Gary can.
Yeah, hi guys. I just wanted to ask a quick question. I was on a coffee break and I came back. I was just wondering, are any of these units ADA compliant? I'm on the DRB also, but I just wanted to know, are any of these ADA compliant for people with disabilities that come in there using some of these facilities, especially with the bathroom, the showers? So I guess I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe I don't see it because I can't scroll up to see if there's any of these units or 1 or 2 compliant. Do they need to be compliant, or do they have to be met up with specifications with the ADA?
That's a good question, Gary. None of them are required to be ADA accessible. That would, yeah, I mean, you know, it would be up to the developer if they're using like universal design principles, but yeah, there's no requirement here. as
Really?
written.
Shouldn't we have a requirement like that? I thought we did. I thought we had, maybe that was something else. I thought we had a
It's not-
requirement of some percentage had to be ADA compliant. Didn't we talk about that?
I'm trying to think where we talked about it, but not for the SROs.
Huh.
What are some other resident or housing where that applies? Where there has to be, yeah. I mean, did the Winston or did the Wyndham and Windsor build frost block building have to do it by you know mandate, or did they do it, you know, out of their own option? I mean, I'm not saying that's a single. I'm not saying that's an SRO, but
I think it's a bit of both, Tom. I think either mandated or something they just did on their own for a lot of people that are challenged dealing with, you know, stairs and all that and dealing in the kitchen. Maybe 1 or 2 units, and a lot of them are considering it, and there's others that have to be updated, but it's a lot of work into that. And I think that's something that, you know, that could be considered down the road.
right.
Why am I remembering? I mean, I think we must have been, it must have been the frost block that was talked about, because I thought there was some percentage that had to be ADA compliant, and the notion about compliance was, well, 2 things. One was that, you know, essentially we all at some point in our lives are going to need those sorts of rooms, so they are absolutely essential. But then I believe the developer talked about the fact that it was also sort of hard to fill them. Sue, help me, I'm remembering this, we had this conversation. I feel like I'm sure it was in the commission. Where else have I been where I would have been talking about housing?
Perhaps ancient
I am not
ancient Egypt or whatever it is that you were studying.
Italy.
Sorry, I like
Italy,
making
which is not ADA compliant.
Right, yeah, no, they were not ADA compliant in the medieval period, I'm sorry.
I am not recalling, I do know that there's ADA accessible units in a lot of Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust projects and Red Clover Commons. I am not sure if that's a requirement of their funding or just because it makes sense. But yeah, I can't think off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to, give it some more thought to figure out where that may have come from.
And would you be opposed to the notion of us saying that, for every 15 units, there should be one that's ADA compliant?
I don't think I'd be opposed to that. I'm just trying to think of whether or not, does it change the hallway width? I'm kind of curious to look into building code and to see what the state would require and how it matches up, just so that we have everything on the table and we know what we're making a decision about.
That would be great.
I just did a control F, as Andrew said, it's your friend, in the land use regs for ADA, and the only way places where it comes up is with sidewalks and
parking.
Yeah, maybe parking. Yeah. So, I mean, I certainly don't want to seem like I'm espousing not caring for people who need this, but my intent with bringing some of these changes to the SRO is because of, like I said, my history with being there. And I guess what is an SRO back in grad school? It wasn't affiliated with the campus, but the university. But anyway, and so it was very affordable. And so if this requirement, requires like that sort of building that I can recall being in 12 years ago for $400 a month, to have an elevator, and all sorts of other things, then it's like it removes my whole. It goes against. It's horses pulling in opposite directions, I think, to use Rich's analogy from before. And then, but I mean, I think we should maybe talk about our housing in general and multi-unit dwellings and multi-apartment buildings, and not just SROs, and if we want to have an ADA requirement or not.
Well, I got to agree with Sue on that. That's something that, like a lot of places that are grandfathered in aren't really apt to having to change. It's just something like they do this with state housing in that sense. But, somewhere down the road, like I said, something like this is just something to consider for future, like they're doing with the new Amtrak and a lot of other places now. They're building accessibilities and places for people that are having these challenges that they have to deal with. In a lot of places they can't access or get into, especially with new buildings and new building codes. And like what Sue was saying, that might just change the graphics of what you're trying to do, and that's going to be costly, and that's something that probably might want to factor in and consider. But something like that, if it's too late, I would just go ahead and do what you're doing.
Okay, so we got kind of sidetracked away from the kitchen. What did we decide on the kitchen?
I just want to add one comment to that. I mean, I really like that.
I almost called Jessica James because of her handle there. That I think washer and dryer is much easier to define because it can only be used by one person at once. But I mean, a refrigerator, like how many people's food fits into a refrigerator at once? I don't know. Like how many people can use a stove at once? I don't know. Are people cooking up ramen or are they doing multi-dish meals? So it's like, it gets challenging. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider this. I'm just saying, I don't know really where to begin. I don't know what number sounds good. I could say that like I've lived in a house with 4 people or 5 people and I visited some other people who were like a house of 7 people, and they were all sharing one normal single family kitchen. And I have as well in with 4 people, and it seemed to work out fine. But I don't know if that should be the basis to extrapolate a ratio. So
it seems like this standard this is something we may want to look into a little further. What's coming off the top of my head is, Sue, just to confirm, with any sort of unit in town, they all have to, if they were going to have their own kitchen per unit, they have to comply to the rental housing code regarding what defines a kitchen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, because I was going to say we could maybe, to get around this is that, oh, we just require a kitchen per unit, but then obviously then we're getting away, Tom, as you were saying, what makes these SROs more not as expensive as regular units because they don't have all the amenities necessarily. So I don't want to have to go, we don't want to necessarily have to make that a requirement because we, again, don't want to keep up in the prices, right? So yeah, this is I think a tough one.
But this is, I think, one of those things where we can just rely on planning knowledge. I mean, out there must be a kind of standard for SROs and kitchen facilities. I mean, at least maybe not a standard, but a sort of series of different things that we could choose from if you chaps could tell us.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying,
Yeah,
if we could spend more time, we
research
can get you
that.
we can bring you a couple of examples of different language and then we can review.
Great.
All right, so we've got some stuff to bring back on this one. And then the next one, if you're ready to move on, is the campground. And we had some discussion. First of all, it is clear, like in the structure of the land use regulations, that this sits under lodging use. So we are talking about campsites that, there's an exchange of money for these. It is a lodging use, not personal or use of people just coming to stay for a couple of days and camping out on your property or that kind of thing. Tom had questioned the restriction of November 1st through March 31st. I looked at regulations kind of across the state, and there are, we seem to be the only town that does have a restriction on time. And I know that Brian, the zoning administrator, had some concerns over, if it's being used long-term, then there's kind of some wastewater issues. And a lot of times the systems are built for the warmer weather and don't function as well throughout the winter. So what I'm proposing here is if you wanted to do away with the November 1st to March 31st time restriction, then we could add number 5. It'd be renumerated, but basically saying that they just always need to be in compliance with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. So, if they're switching to something that's kind of year round, then they're maybe going to need to upgrade their water and wastewater systems, or we can keep it the way it was.
And are the regulations time specific? In other words,
the states.
Yeah, the states. In other
No.
words, if you want to have a campground and you don't want to, you don't want to operate it between November 1st and March 31st, and you want to leave your wastewater the way it is, if we get rid of this stipulation, but say you have to require to that, are we going to actually cancel out some campgrounds that could function as long as they were closed between November and March? Do you get my point?
I'm not sure I followed that.
So,
I don't think we'd be canceling.
Say I have a really simple wastewater system and it works perfectly fine if I'm open, as long as I close on November 1st and I open again in March. And it doesn't comply with the state's wastewater system. And that's okay because there wasn't a regulation there before. But now here I am merrily having my campground, and I never ever want to open it up after November 1st. But now there's a new regulation. Now I could open it up after November 1st, but now all of a sudden I have to comply with the state's wastewater regulation. No,
I don't believe. Yeah, I don't believe we have any campgrounds that don't have a state wastewater permit.
So then I'm confused
So
about how making this regulation would guarantee that people had wastewater systems that could comply through the winter, that could function through the winter.
it's basically putting it on them. I don't know what each individual wastewater permit says. It could have some restrictions on time. And so if we had a campground that came and said, we want to be operating year round, it's on them to make sure that their permit is in compliance with the state.
But they wouldn't come.
Which is
because
always the
if we got rid of this number 1, they could just do whatever they wanted to.
Well, they'd be breaking the state rules.
And if
wait, so you're saying if they're not
they could be, depending on their permit, yes.
right? So some of the knowledge I have of the DEC, wastewater rules is that I think a campground is defined as like having 3 or more campsites, cabins, etc. And it's there's no distinction between private or commercial use. As far as our rules go, it's just commercial. And then, like one of the options they allow is you might think like how to handle this through the winter if it's just tents or yurts or cabins. And there's some wording like all the structures or the lodging needs to be within 500 feet of a wastewater, a permitted wastewater system and water supply. And then so you might think like, how can that be done in the winter? And so maybe that one building is weatherproofed and heated 24/7. I don't know. I haven't seen these facilities, since I've started thinking and caring about this stuff. But it seems, and then a lot of, there's all sorts of rules and restrictions at the state level, and whether or not people can get around it or not, or and abuse it or not, it seems like what am I trying to say? A lot of it operates on good faith or people's filing complaints if someone doesn't. And so I think this just gels with a lot of other things like that.
Yeah, I guess I'm still stuck on the notion of if the regulation, if the time frame is in there in order to make sure that people's wastewater systems don't, suffer and fall apart because they're not winter compliant. That I like that. I'm all for that regulation. And I don't necessarily see that it's so important for us to allow people to be camping from November to March. I mean, I that just doesn't seem like a biggie for me. I mean, but that's just me. I mean, this is one of these things that go ahead. Sorry.
No, what I was going to say is I don't know that the time frame was put in strictly because of the wastewater and water. I think it was just proposed to us back in 2015 and we went with it. I'd have to look up and see if our previous regulations had any time frame. So I wouldn't necessarily put those two together. I know that when Brian was at the last meeting, he had some concern about getting rid of the time because some of the systems maybe aren't. I mean, first of all, I think I know of one Camp Wabanog in town. I think there's some cabins that are not rented out through the winter up at the Austin campus. So we're not talking about a lot of campgrounds here in town that this applies to, but yeah, I guess just to go back, I don't think one was put in place on the wastewater. So I think we can think about it as, do we think it's reasonable to have camping in town in the winter? And they're going to have to have water and wastewater that complies with the state.
Yes, Tom, what?
Oh, sorry. I was pointing to Dory, but all I want to say is,
Sorry, yeah, you're pointing to the bottom of my computer.
oh yeah, I think they should keep the same orientation for all viewers, so you can do that. Yeah, I just want to say that I think even though it does kind of strike me that there's not many campgrounds open during those times, you know, for cabins or campsites, obviously, but if they have, you know, nice cabins, it strikes me as odd, you know, because of we tout our ski season as being so fundamental to Vermont, but yet you would think, you know, a lot of people would want to stay in cabins, and I think they do, but it's just like Airbnb sort of setups. So I don't, you know, if someone wants to start a business with 4 cabins, you know, to service, you know, people year round, including the skiers and snowboarders, like, I don't want to bar that, you know, because that could bring them to our town.
Yeah, I don't want to rain on the parade, except for that, you know, there's not much future in the business of winter sports in Vermont, as far as I'm concerned. Sorry.
Well, if it's getting warmer, we can shorten that season then.
Right.
To February.
Right, and we yeah, okay. Anyway, are other commissioners have an opinion on this?
Yeah,
I see Dory and Kathy and Prudence have their hands raised.
Great, because I can't see that. So Prudence, go ahead.
so if somebody wanted to build some cabins, you know, Airbnb for skiers, I don't think it would be a campground, you know, so I don't think that these would apply. And then I just want to make sure, I'm a little confused if we add this, are we, I'm not sure if we're adding, you know, what the requirements are for the Department of Environmental Conservation, if that's burdensome for campgrounds, but if there aren't any campgrounds in town, then maybe it doesn't matter anyway. The cabins that I'm aware of at campgrounds
well-
generally are not insulated, and they, you know, they're not, I think we have to be careful that we don't get into something where there's substandard housing and people are desperate and it's cheap, and then that's permitted and doesn't, you know, and doesn't meet the kind of standards that we would want people to live in.
And I think that was part of Brian's concerns, Prudence. What I would say is I don't know the ins and outs of the water and wastewater regulations from the state, but regardless if it's here or not, it is their requirement if they're providing a system that they have a permit from the state.
So this regulation that you've added, number 5, is already, it's already required.
Yes.
Oh.
So then are we just wondering about one, whether we should have one, whether one should stay or not?
I think that is the big question. Yes.
And, you know, I mean, people who are in these self-contained campers and stuff, they have heaters. You know, they're probably, you know, winter camping is something people enjoy doing, so maybe we could eliminate that.
Other folks, Sue, you said that Jessica and Dory had their hands up, but I can't see that. So you two?
Dory and Kathy.
Dory and Kathy.
No, Dory and Kathy.
Yeah, my train's about to go by, so it may get a little loud, but I know some people who live in relatively more either have lived through winter via tent, like heavy canvas tent with wood stove, or cabin. And then there's like a building on the land that has the wastewater, has the bathroom or so on and so forth. I think whatever we decide to word it, I think it's important to leave the ability for that to be a way of people to get cheap housing who desire it. Obviously, it sucks if that's all you can afford, but a lot of people do come to Vermont to live in slightly more like rustic accommodations because it is a way of life. And I think I think so. However we word it, I think whatever allows people to do it longer year round is the right choice.
Roy is a good point. People have been living in the state for 12,000 years in all sorts of conditions. So, I mean, I don't want to discourage a lifestyle.
Kathy?
Yeah, I'm inclined to just remove the dates as well. But I also was curious about RVs and whether that fits into the campground, right? So, or is that covered somewhere else in the zoning?
An RV could fit into the campground. It depends if you're talking about an RV just parked in somebody's driveway or, because I think there is restrictions on that, but I'm gonna have to control F it.
Yeah, I was thinking like an RVs at campgrounds with like hookups and things like that. Like it doesn't explicitly.
That would be part of it. Those types of RVs would be covered here under the campground.
So I'm getting the sense that we're okay doing away with number one, the line number one, and then renumbering to bring us back to 4, but without the date. Is that everybody okay with that? Okay. Okay, do we have more of these things? It's now past 8.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, Tom, of course.
In that section, lodging structures and uses, all the other ones have a time limit. So of 14 days or 30 days, that seems to be the defining thing, or maybe the fact that, that seems to be the defining thing of that section. I don't know if we want to move this one to the section before or to put the time limit on it, but I mean, I know Prudence was showing some concern, so I don't want to, I want to just show that that's an option, because for bed and breakfasts, hotels and motels, inns, there's a 14-day continuous limit. And for rooming and boarding houses, there's a 30-day limit. But then in the section before, which, we were talking about attached housing, SROs, there's no limit. So I don't know. Just a little detail of options.
So if we were to put the campground under the 30-day. No, Sue thinks
the reason that a bed and breakfast and inn have a time period is because they're in the residential neighborhoods. They're meant to be transient. I don't think, a hotel and a motel does not have, they have a 90-day time limit. So it's not just 14 on a hotel motel. The idea that they're organized under lodging structures is just that there's, they're, kind of, I wanted to say for money, their business is making money, but I guess you could argue that a landlord is as well. But that's kind of the idea. Somebody's owning it and making money by people coming to stay there.
Jess, I can't see you anymore, but I saw your hand was up.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna voice my support for Sue's comment about long-term camping. I mean, there's definitely a culture of seasonal camping, especially in our area with retirees and RV folks that come here from April to October and then head somewhere warmer. So
definitely.
Okay.
Time limit would make that economic sort of engine a little tricky.
All right, good. Are we ready to move on? Super. What's next, Sue?
Well, we were going to get into some zoning district stuff, but I am concerned about the time, and I think if we could pick up on the zoning in February. I think there's two other things. I don't know what kind of time people have to finish, to spend on other things, but I know the hazard mitigation planning is kind of important to get to if anybody's had time to look at those materials. I'm wondering, Felicity, if the Planning Commission might entertain a brief discussion about that before we end the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's shift to hazard mitigation and come back to zoning in February. Is everybody okay with that? Great, okay.
Thanks.
Sue, do you want to unshare your
Yeah,
screen?
sure. So let me stop sharing. So Brian Bannon is working on an update to the hazard mitigation plan. We've talked about it before. Kathy is actually serving as a representative of the Planning Commission. Brian is hoping to get a little bit of feedback on the projects that have kind of been pulled together. They fall into 6 categories that kind of hazard mitigation planning has for projects, which are preventative, property protection, natural resource protection, emergency services, structural projects, and public information. If it's easier for you, I can also share the screen so that you can see what the projects are. And then he's also hoping for a little bit of feedback on the screening or ranking criteria that we'll look at to kind of not necessarily prioritize projects, but decide which projects kind of make the plan. So these were probably in the file a bit longer if anybody looked earlier. Late last week, you would have seen them. I'll just figure out how to share the screen, but
yeah, everybody, I want to know who's who here. There's a raccoon and there's a badger and there's a bunny and a lizard. We lost our unicorn though. I wonder which one I am. I guess I could turn it
Yeah,
on
more
and then
people have
somebody
joined.
can tell me. Can you guys all see the raccoon and the badger and the bunny and the lizard?
I see them now. Okay.
I think I must be the raccoon because I don't see that one.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's you.
You must be jackalope.
Oh, who's
Okay,
all right, sorry.
So
Go
these are the list of projects that were identified by the Hazard Mitigation Committee, including interviews that Andrew conducted with various people around town, including Alex Wilson, who deals with resiliency, Rich Holshoe, who is on the meeting earlier, who represents tribal and cultural interests, Brattleboro Dispatch, Wyndham Regional Commission, all the sorts. And so these are the bold underlined, enumerated are the 6 classes established in the community rating system hazard mitigation evaluation matrix. And so the goal of the purpose of this is we need this hazard mitigation plan to identify hazards that the town faces and develop strategies to reduce the risks to life and property.
Andrew, do
And
you see the sorry, does somebody see Dory's note in the chat?
Yeah, I can. I'll
Okay, great. Thanks. Go ahead, Sue, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so basically we're trying to reduce the risks of the hazards by either redirecting the impact of the hazard, either through structure or land treatment that can be, conserving land and or, putting a structure in place that might help, or by modifying structures and standards. The list that we have here is kind of a combination of lots of different treatments. So preventative is, you can see the list there. I'm happy to take any feedback that you might have. We're still doing a lot of property protection. If you look under there, Melrose is still working on their housing relocation. Tri-Park has lots of units that are in the floodplain and the floodway that we have a plan that they're going to try to implement to remove those risks, remove those homes from the hazard areas. There's flood proofing, you know, the kind of the preventative stuff is we want to have a stormwater ordinance, probably a stormwater master plan, so that we can help reduce street flooding and other impacts to town infrastructure. We want to improve our flood hazard regulations. In fact, we're waiting on new rules that are coming out from the National Flood Insurance Program. I think they were effective January 1st. They haven't released what those rules are yet, but that's another zoning amendment that we're going to need to do. Yeah, so these are just some of the projects that we're talking about.
Are we gonna have time to think about this, or does Brian want substantive comments back tonight?
He would like substantive comments. So if you're not feeling like you can give that tonight, if you can take a look at them and send them our way, that would be important. I think he's trying to have a draft of this plan by the end of the month.
Okay. Jessica.
Just curious, like what are the specific hazards that are defined and addressed in this plan, and what does the word support mean?
What does the word, what was your second question? What does the word
support happens a lot. Does that mean the town will invest? Does that mean staff time will be dedicated? Does that mean that the planning commission will back up any requests or plans that are coming through us? Like, yeah, what it like, it's a little unclear to me what that means.
Okay, support final Melrose, like something like that. So support in that way, it depends. So it could mean that we're providing staff support sometimes to do some tasks involved with that. So for example, with Melrose Terrace, Brian has done some of the environmental review that was required. The town has submitted applications through Vermont Community Development Program. Like for the Tri-Park Master Plan, we secured the funding for that, and we ran that project. So support can come in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's financial, like we did with Tri-Park Master Plan. Sometimes it's staff time. Sometimes it's helping connect them to the resources or finding grants that they can apply to. But I would say mostly it's staff time or financial when we say support in this. And then your first question, I've already forgotten.
It was what hazards? I mean, it's flooding, obviously.
Oh, what are the hazards? Yeah, so flooding. Yeah, flooding is our main hazard. We are concerned about increased risk of fire due to drought. Sometimes we have wind damage, but that's pretty, flooding is our big one. Landslide, we have lots of retaining walls. We've got areas like Strand Avenue. And I can think of some areas if you're driving north on Route 30 and you look to the west, there's some steep slopes. So, we're concerned about landslides. It hasn't really come up very much as an issue, but there are lots of large retaining walls around town. But I would say flooding is the main hazard. Hot weather. Do we have those supports in place? One of the things that is on this list is kind of public information, communications. how do we communicate with people? And we know in some of the mobile home parks that there's people living on limited incomes without a lot of access to what's going on outside. You know, they maybe don't have a phone, not because of their income, it could be because of their age. They don't have a phone. They don't have an answering machine. So how do you communicate the information to them? So there's some ideas of how do we make sure that they're safe in an emergency or that they're prepared. Those have come up as projects.
I just shared in the chat a link to the story map and survey, which I think helps, you know, the images and stuff help to sort of frame this.
Thanks, Kathy. If you want, I can bring that up. And maybe this is a way that you can provide information after the meeting too, if you want to think about some of the hazards that maybe you're aware of, and drop it in here.
Yeah, is Brian looking for something formal from the commission, or is he just looking for some feedback from extended sort of public feedback?
I think nothing formal. Yeah, so fire, landslides, heat waves are some of the hazards that I see. My pictures aren't coming up. Well, maybe they are now. Maybe you can see them.
How are you all feeling, commissioners? Are you prepared to give substantive comments back, or do you want to take some more time with this?
I'd like to do both. I think I might have a few ideas.
Okay.
Seeing as we're in the age of a contagious virus that's upending society, I don't know if we did a lot in town, if it would change like the rules and, you know, restrictions and stuff put on us at a state level, but perhaps Brian could explore, you know, changes to make us more resilient to contagious diseases. We talked about some stuff that, you know, that we could come up with in past meetings, but I'm sure there's a lot more, like with design of public spaces at least, and facilities and, you know, features that they may have. And then I don't know if it's you brought that up, Sue, with getting in touch with all those folks that may be hard to communicate with, but I wonder if maybe there is something like this, but if we could somewhat get out of the snail mail age and have like a town-wide email list, not really in that sense, but like, you know, like an email database of all residents. So that way you can just fire an email, you know, if there's some emergency, you can just fire an email to every single property owner, resident, whatever in town, instead of sending letters or making phone calls or relying on Facebook. So.
Except that not everybody has email.
I know. Well,
so
yeah.
it's kind of a, you know, when Vermont Yankee was open, there were a lot of people received radios from that, and it seems like the money that has come and gone with the BY closure. So yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, I think email is part of it, you know, putting out these messages, and those kind of systems exist. And I think the fire department used to be really good about collecting that kind of information. And I think we need to up our game about how do we communicate with people in the event of an emergency.
Well,
I think there is not just one solution.
The neighborhood, you know, Erin, why am I blanking there?
Brattleboro Area Mutual Aid.
Yes, Brattleboro Area Mutual Aid. That organization that did a great deal of work putting together neighborhood and even neighborhood maps. And then got a wider number of people to put their, you know, to make their emails known. So it's not a bad idea to have I mean, I'm sure, I think that organization intended to continue its existence. I mean, if they could be part of the hazard mitigation plan, that would, and maybe that would enable them to apply for some funding at some point to continue their work. That might be great.
I will pass that along. I agree. I'm not sure. I had heard that they had kind of wanted to step away from that organizing role, but perhaps it's a place for somebody else to step in.
Right.
Because I think it was really important, and may still be, definitely in the early days of COVID.
Right. But some of the work that they did doesn't all have to disappear. I mean, they can get other people to keep it going.
Definitely.
Other thoughts, chaps? Yes, Prudence.
I wonder if Tom, your comments about adding, pandemic to this, I wonder if we should think about a separate process for that, just because it sounds like there's been this work on hazard mitigation and they're looking for input and to close it out. I don't know. And I'm also confused in terms of the feedback. Like I read through, those all sound like good projects, but is there a desire to hear from people which projects they think are more important than others?
I don't think he's looking for that at this point. I think maybe that would be feedback through the proposed project evaluation criteria, which is on the first page. If you feel that there are certain things that should be weighted heavier, I think that would be useful to know. We know with the projects that some of them are really, really expensive and are going to take, but might be really important. So it might take a long time to, find the funding for that, whereas others are kind of the low hanging fruit, so to say, and might not have as big of an impact, but might be more feasible and might get done sooner. So so it's always kind of a tricky thing when we're looking at these projects. A lot of times we just take advantage of opportunities as they come, but we are required to kind of evaluate them as well. So that's what the evaluation criteria is for.
Jessica.
Yeah, I do have feedback on one of the criteria. It's just does the action protect historic structures or structures critical to town operations? I feel like those should be separate things. The structures critical to town operations, to me, seem maybe more important in a crisis than historic structures.
Perish the thought, Jessica. What are you talking about?
I know. I'm sorry.
We are nothing without our history. Sorry. I mean, we haven't even come up with criteria of how we judge history. So that is a little problematic. Whatever happened with that committee? Didn't we decide to in people a committee to do?
We have the design review committee, but we don't have a historic district, or we don't have a historic.
Didn't we say we were going to do that? Then we got COVID.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we've been swamped with other things to get it off the ground, but yes. It's not thrown out yet.
Well, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm kind of running out of gas here. I am
This is
more than
useful. These
happy
are
to-
useful comments.
Yeah. Gary's got a question. They have the right email.
Oh, I think Gary and Dory are having a conversation
Having
about
a chat
tenants
conversation.
union.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're
what
sidebarring.
I would
Sorry,
say-
sorry about that. No sidebarring allowed.
So can people look
So
at this?
with this hazard mitigation,
Go ahead, Sue.
what I wanted to say is, you will see a draft plan back before you. I'm not sure at what point that might be, maybe in February. So maybe that will help with the context a little bit more, and we'll make sure you have it sooner than this was provided to you. I know kind of seeing these just kind of on a page, it's like, yeah, of course, they all sound good. But in the context of a plan, maybe that'll stand out better. But please do send your comments. You can send them to Brian, or you can send them to me and Andrew, and we'll make sure he gets them.
Gary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to ask you, did we mention at one time getting information out there too? I think we mentioned that at one of the select board meetings. I guess not just what you're doing, and also with other committees. I think they're redoing or restructuring the whole town board website and adding other additions. So I was just wondering what Tom was saying too, getting that information out there, board to people, trying to find new ways to reach them. So I guess that's Tom. I guess that dialogue is going to be brought up probably at one of the town meetings this month. So hopefully you'll be there on the Tuesdays, and you can bring that up also to that as well too. And I totally agree, because this is a way of reaching out. I mean, a lot of people don't have cable, like Sue said, a lot of people don't have accessibility, and broadband is a big thing here with getting on the internet. And that's probably the thing. Maybe a couple of resources, because when the library was open, that was the resource center, and a couple of other places. But we have to restructure how we get information out there because of COVID. So something like that, how do we get that out there? Like you said, I don't know if anyone's going to sit down and send out mailers. It's a good job, I guess, but there's something to consider. So yeah, if you come to the meeting, that'd be awesome, and brainstorm some things. That'd be great, because I have a few ideas, and I believe Ian is going to bring up a few things too, and that's something that'd be great for everyone to attend. So this is going to be a rather busy month at the select board, with a lot of things coming up and a lot of surveys as well too. So hopefully we'll see you guys there.
Okie doke. Are we good to go, Sue?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. If you got 2 minutes, let me just tell you about the housing study.
Please.
So we're putting together a steering committee to review the RFP, and then kind of work with the consultants as this project moves forward. And so again, I'm curious if any planning commissioners are interested in working on that with us. I see a steering committee maybe meeting 3 or 4 times between now and the project completion. And we are going to have some outside representatives on it. I think someone from Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, somebody from Groundworks. So yeah, looking for some planning commission support on that if anybody's interested in the housing. And we will also be going out to the tenants union too, asking for a rep.
Jessica, your hand is up. Gary, your hand is up. And
Just because I want to volunteer for that.
what you want to volunteer? Okay, that's great. Dory, you want to volunteer for that? Good. Is that good?
That's great. Were you interested, Felicity?
I'll do it. Sure. If I can.
And I'll be
Okay.
there. And there, I imagine there will also be another member of the tenants union as well.
Okay, I'll
Reach out.
be in touch, Dory, with the tenants union.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved by Prudence. Is there a second? Yes, Kathy seconds. All those in favor of adjourning the Planning Commission meeting of this January 4th, 2021. Oh, yeah. Well, anybody against? All right, we're stand adjourned. Happy New Year, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
How do I get out of here?